So good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's guest photography session. Hi, Stephen. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, very welcome. Really pleased to have you, pal. And obviously an invite from our friends at Fundy as well. So I've had a sneak peek of the presentation. So that's I'm really looking forward to what you've got to share with everybody tonight. Stephen, just for people that might not be familiar with you, as I wasn't before we met, just tell us a little bit about yourself, really, and how you got into the wedding photography and obviously where you're at today, pal. Have I lost you, Stephen?
Hello. Yes, I'm back now. I couldn't hear you there for a wee second.
Sorry, pal. We seem to be having a slight delay on the internet between us. Sorry, Stephen. I was just asking you to just give us a brief insight into you and obviously your journey into photography.
Yes, no problem. So, yes, hi everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. So I have been a wedding photographer for about 10 years now, and 9 years to be precise. And that's around the same amount of time that I have actually been in photography. And I say that because I shot a wedding very soon after I took an interest in photography. Before I was a photographer, I was actually a coach builder. I built buses for a living in a local factory. I done that for 11 years, and it was a job that I didn't particularly want to do for the rest of my life. And I suppose I always was seeking something that I really enjoyed to do. And in fact, I fell upon photography very randomly. I was looking for a hobby at first, and I ended up, just sort of picking up a camera, and I instantly got hooked. And that was in 2008, and I started studying online. Online classes, and I ended up going to university to do a degree in photography quite quick after. And after I started that was basically me hooked.
Brilliant, mate. And was weddings always going to be where you were going, do you think, or is that just something that's come with the way things have gone for you?
Yeah, so initially I wanted to be a fashion photographer. Whenever I went to university, that would have been my plan. But during university, I learned more the sort of art side of photography, producing series of images rather than single images. And for a while, that was what I wanted to do. Although I was getting married, in my second year of university. I ended up uh, going to get married, so I needed money, and I had shot a couple of weddings, and I thought I can do this to get some money, but I quickly fell in love with wedding photography, and I haven't looked back since.
Brilliant, mate. Absolutely brilliant. Right. Well, we won't waste any time. I'm going to give you the screen. So it's going to come over to you now.
Okay.
And I'll let you know when I can see everything nice and clearly before I go quiet on you. Obviously, while we're just getting Stephen's presentation online for you guys, any questions or queries, please pop those through the question panel. I'll ask those where appropriate. And then we've allowed plenty of time at the end for questions as well. So I can see there's there we go, Stephen. We're all full screen mode. I can see it nice and clear. I can hear you. So I'm going to go quiet, Stephen. If we have any, we've had a few sort of delay problems. If we've got any problems, and if I do lose Stephen, then we'll just quickly pause the webinar and get him on the phone if we need to. But Stephen, it's all yours, pal.
Great. Thanks very much, Jay. So thank you everybody for tuning in for this webinar. I'm very excited to be here to share my any information I have to you. So tonight I will be teaching sort of through my experiences on shooting weddings and using light. in particular light in relation to telling stories with weddings. So yeah, so I'll just get straight into my presentation. So I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions that you want me to answer, get in touch with Jay through the chat there, and I am happy to answer any questions at any point throughout the webinar. Hopefully hopefully the internet holds up here. It's usually fine, but hopefully we're okay. So tonight I want to go through a few things that I have learned over the last number of years in terms of lighting. And just as an overview, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the principles of light, but we will talk about that first. I will go through using light on weddings and how I do that. We will relate how I relate light into the story and single images, and then after that I will show some examples of I bring up multiple images into a complete story of a wedding, and I also have a pre-wedding engagement shoot to do that as well. So first of all, you know, I believe in learning principles of light simply because if we don't know what we're doing before we go into a job, then it's hard to know what to look for and what to do. There is many different things to learn with lighting, and especially with the principles of light. But because of our time tonight, I'm going to go through some of these things quite quickly. But you know, the good thing is that with light, once you have learned its behaviors and you have sort of tried and tested different things, it is very easy to spot where good light is and predict what's going to happen in terms of how different lighting scenarios look in your images. So the good thing is that, you know, we can learn that, and that we can see it with our very eyes before we take our pictures. So you know, it seems sometimes lighting is daunting. I remember at the beginning, you know, thinking that especially in a wedding, I came home and wasn't happy with the way things turned out, and the lighting wasn't nice. And I now know through experience to, you know, how I can slow down and do different things. But in the beginning it was tough. I will say that. But as time goes on, you learn so much. But in short, the three main things that I think about, what we'll go through in different ways here tonight in terms of light, is the direction of light, the intensity of that light, or the power, and the quality of the light, meaning is the light hard or soft. So it's very important because whether we're using natural light or flash, the direction, you know, has so much importance, because, for example, if the light is over and above our heads, then we sort of end up with panda eyes and different things like that. So the direction is very important. The good thing is, if we're using something like a flash, we can control that. We can control what direction it comes from. Obviously, with natural light, we can't do that. And that's the same with the intensity of light. If we're using the likes of flash, we can change how much power is coming from the flash. And you know, with natural light, that we can do that through reflectors and things. And with obviously the quality of light, it's the same. We can change what we do with that, with reflectors and softboxes and different things. So you know, those three main things I'll probably talk a wee bit about throughout this presentation. Whenever I'm using light on a wedding, the main thing for me is to know exactly what I'm going to use and when I'm going to use it. There is times where you know, you don't get it right every time, but knowing what situation you're in really helps. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a bright sunny day, then you can prepare for using a flash or reflector or whatever. But the thing about it is, with wedding photography in particular, we are under so much pressure, and I know how hard that can get, and I know sometimes the pressure of that takes over, and you come home thinking, oh, why did I not do that, or should have done something a little different. But there's so many different things come upon us on a wedding day. Like, for example, we're working with people, and that is never an easy task. So we have that to contend with. We have different weather situations to contend with. We have many different things that can come against us, and with that pressure, it's good to know what you're doing. And I suppose that is through experience and through learning, like things like this. So the types of light that I use in a wedding, obviously I use natural light or ambient light quite a lot. But the other two lights that I would use, I have an LED light, and I also have a flashlight. So whenever we start going through the images here, you'll see that mostly it's natural light and flash that I would be using. So whether it's natural light or whether it's flash, I try and simplify things so that I know what I'm doing as such. So there's the 4 different ways that I will use light. As always, the 4 things that you can see up in here now, whether it's the sun that's providing the light or whether it's my flash. So the first thing there is, as a key light, if I'm using flash, rarely would I use a flash in a softbox as the only light source on a wedding day, but it does happen. But very often the main light source is coming from the sun, and maybe diffused by clouds or by trees or whatever. But that's probably what we use the most as wedding photographers. As a fill light, that's the way I would use a flash more than anything else. I would say that's which we'll get into a wee bit more in a minute. A separation light. So sometimes I would use the sun coming on the back of the subject, or also use the flash for that. And then as a background light, so for what that I mean, light in the background and emphasizing it more than the actual subject itself. But all these things come into play, especially whenever we're posing our subjects, which we'll get into in a wee second here. So I think it's a good time for me to quickly talk about the equipment that I would use on a wedding day. So the cameras I use are Sony. I have a Sony A9, which is an absolute incredible wedding photographer's camera. I would use that mostly throughout the day, and I also have a Sony A7R3, which I would use mainly for the portraits. And maybe ask why. It's because with a bigger sensor, bigger file size, if I need to print any images bigger from a wedding day, it would be those. Although some days I just stick to the A9. As I say, it's an amazing wedding camera, and the low light capabilities is just superb. And since I have switched to Sony, I have seen such a difference, and how I use the cameras on the day and stuff. So I tend to use one lens. I used to chop and change. Talking about this quite a lot over the next few minutes. The main thing for me in a wedding day is traveling light and having equipment at my hand whenever I need it. So I have been shooting with the 24-70 the last probably 6 months. That has been stuck on one of my cameras nearly all the time. So in terms of lighting, as I said before, that I use an LED which stays in my camera bag all the time. and it's a Photox LED. I can change the power of that, and I can also change the color temperature. So that stays in my bag along with the Photox Metros Plus, which is quite a small flash, and that would come with me wherever I go on a wedding day. The big light that I use is a Photox Indra 500, and I basically use that when I can and whenever I need more power. But that is what I take with me. I have quite a small camera bag. As I say, I travel light, and everything is there for a reason. So talking about equipment, I carry just minimal equipment with me at different times of the day. For example, if I'm shooting bridal preparations, I quite often just take my camera with the camera bag and with the LED and small flash in it. I would never carry the big light in, basically because I'm trying to shoot quite a lot of documentary style images, and the last thing you want is to be sort of faffing about with equipment and getting stuck. So I keep a minimal amount there. So for me at that stage of the day, I'm shooting normally with natural light, and I would say the main thing for me at that stage is I have to keep everything in control. As you can see with the image to the right on the screen, that's a natural light that I used. That's a natural moment. But in fact, I did say whenever we were about to shoot this scene, I did say, can we do it in this particular area because there was nice light, and I will do that quite often throughout the day. Whereas the picture to the left is obviously posed by myself, but it's natural light that I have used there, and the natural light is coming in from the left hand side, our left hand side, or the bride's right hand side, and I have posed according to that light, meaning I have turned the body away from the light and head back in, drop her chin down toward her shoulder, and you can see we've got a lovely soft image of her. Again, going into, I'll just go through this quite quickly, going into the ceremony and reception. I know in advance that, well, most churches and most venues have windows coming on one side, so I'll always shoot from that side. I never, very rarely will I use flash in a ceremony. I used to a few years ago, but with the camera technology now, I feel all you're doing is pointing out that there's a photographer here taking probably far too many shots, and so I don't use flash unless I really need to. So that's you'll see whenever I start going through my actual wedding here in a wee second that a good lot of it is shot with the natural light, but then we move into flash at different points of the day. For example, whenever I'm shooting the portraits of the bride and groom and also the bridal party, I am in full control. So that is whenever I bring my photography style into action, so to speak, and I start introducing the lights, start introducing different sort of techniques to get different scenarios sort of lit differently and to tell a story in different ways. So Jay, do we have any questions at this point, or shall I carry on?
Only a couple, but I will ask it. Any reflectors being used at all, Simon, Stephen?
No, I used to use reflectors, and I found they were a hindrance to me. I work alone, so I left them in the car for a while, and now I just don't. To be honest, I don't even know where my reflector is anymore. So to me, I haven't time. I have no place to carry one as such, so I don't use them anymore.
Brilliant. The other questions I've got are kind of more general, so I'll hang on to them for now, mate. You crack on.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, so relating light to a story, there's there's different things. So we've seen this image a wee second ago. As I said, I placed the people here to begin with. I said, if you're putting the veil in, can we come out of the dark room which was behind? And this was set up, but then the moment happened. So if we were in where they were going to put the veil in, I would have had no light in the subject, and this picture wouldn't have worked, because really the expression is coming from the bride's face. So for me, I have to have an element of control. As you know, it doesn't always work out this way, but if we can control something, we might as well do that. So the first number of images I'm going to go through here are all using natural light. Everything is very soft. For example, here with the bride and groom walking away from the bridal party, I've just it was a cloudy day, yes, but the light, the direction of the light is coming from behind me. I have shot that way for a specific reason. If I had a shot the opposite way, there would have been no quality light on the subject, and I think it's very easy to get caught up in the moment with posing and ideas and different things, but the actual light is the important part first and foremost. So that's the reason why I've shot in that direction. Exactly the same here as natural light. The only difference being here, and you can see from the other side of the bride, the far side of the bride, that it's actually a very sunny day. I have just brought the bride in below a tree, and I have used the fall off of light rather than just place her into sheer darkness or in shade. She was specifically put there because there was nice light falling on her face, which is where you want your eye to go. Whenever you're using natural light, it's very important that you put the brightest part of the image where you want your eye to go to first, which is mostly the face. Another simple image, the same again. The light is coming from behind me on the left hand side, and even though it's a very soft sort of day and cloudy, the image actually suits that. I have posed in relation to that, and what I mean is there's a nice soft pose. They're smiling at each other quite often, as you'll see in a wee second. Whenever I'm posing couples, getting them carry on or laughing, I will always have soft light, and you know the reason. Well, they have soft expressions, laughter and smiling. Why would you put hard light into that? So that's the reason for that. I'm putting this image into the webinar because I'm going to show you these guys' album here in a wee second. But this is a family who I was shooting their wedding, and in the lead up to the wedding, they had lost a child, and they had asked me if I would do a portrait for them before the wedding day, but they wanted me to include the child that they had lost. And I had an idea of doing the wee picture with the shoes, as some people would do with a newborn, but it wasn't until the sun came out and I seen the shadows, I put the shoes and shot the legs and the shadows. So this is a perfect example of actually showing how story can relate to light or the absence of light. So that was a portrait I've done of them. As I say, their wedding album will come up soon. So in different lighting situations, as I said before, it's really good to be able to actually see what you're doing. This bride was facing the opposite way, getting ready, and I had seen there was lovely, beautiful light coming in the window, and I just sort of grabbed that opportunity. So there was a lot of light sort of bouncing around the room, but the main thing was that the light is sitting beautifully on her face, and again, it's just about identifying, like, that room wasn't the prettiest of all rooms. It was kind of like there was a load of books around, but it was a bit of a mess, and my advice in that situation is just to go in close, as I have done here, and that you get lovely, beautiful images with just natural light. Another image with just natural light coming in the church window. This is a groom just before he goes or before he gets married, and I have used the light here. I know it's quite harsh, but it just kind of is quite fitting with the pose and the sort of dark dreariness of the church. So rather than just taking the groom outside and doing standard shots, I have always have it in my head, both with the bride and the groom, to do something like this to sort of vary the story of the day. Again, natural light, just by overexposing in the camera, placing the subject in front of the sun and letting the sun sort of wrap around them. And obviously it's given a story of sort of dreaminess. I know everybody wants a sunset in their wedding, and for me this is a perfect way to get the sort of lovey-dovey images of the couple. But then I'll also with this, obviously, I introduce flash and do things with the flash too. This is actually reflected light. So I done a previous picture, but there was a white wall behind me, quite a bit behind me, but it was reflecting the most beautiful light onto the subject. But I purposely brought the subject here, and the reason why I'm showing you that is just because I actually seen that the light was there and moved towards it. So same thing again with the sunset. This was quite a wet day, and the rain stopped for literally seconds. The bride had forgot her veil and people were away to get it, and I took the opportunity to take the bride's picture here. Even though it was a cloudy day, outside of the church was quite flat. As soon as I put the bride into here, you can see there's a bit more detail. There's some shadow areas, and there's absolutely beautiful light coming into the door. This is a fantastic way of getting lovely moody images. I would encourage you, when possible, to move into doorways and then to like below trees and do the likes of this here. So another image here, we've used natural light on the bride, but in fact, if I introduced a small bit of flash into this image, and I know it's very subtle, but the groom who was opening the door of the car, I have my flash at the other side of the car pointing toward his face. As I say, it's just very subtle, but if I hadn't have done that, then you wouldn't be able to see the groom at all. That is essential to this part of the story. So because if you couldn't see his face, then it just wouldn't be the same. The reason why I done this was because I done the same picture before, and I didn't put flash under the groom's face, and I thought, well, I knew that was the wrong thing to do, so I thought I'll not make that mistake again. Another groom, I've been using a flash here. He's in a Mustang, which is quite a sort of muscle sort of car, and therefore with the groom sitting the way he is, I have used quite hard light on him. I've used the bare flash of a flash gun here, and you get obviously the image that we have shown here. This couple I showed you a minute ago, this image would have been taken around the same time I had done one with natural light. The only difference being here, I've used the flash coming from behind them. You can see from the image, I have also put a wee bit of flash in front of them. You can see the light at their feet. That's just to add to the story. And the reason why the flash works from behind as well is because the couple are looking back and there's interaction with their faces. Am I okay to keep going there, Jay, or any questions?
I was just about to step in because I think we've just got a chunk of questions about the flash and things like that. So should we ask them now, if that's all right with you, Steve?
Yeah, that's fine.
Brilliant. Let's talk about some specific shots then. The first one we saw where the bride was in the car and you talked about the husband, you used the flash so you could get the husband in the reflection. Can you just reiterate where the flash would have been positioned? Was it on him?
Yes, so the flash, if you can see, where the back door is at the other side, I would have had somebody standing there with their hand up above the roof, pointing the flash toward the groom at that side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, perfect. And then with the muscle car, the Mustang one, was was it inside the car?
No, so with this, the flash was actually coming in through the window at the left hand side. So the I think I've actually taken a wee bit of the flash away from the window. There was some flash noticeable where the flash was, but I've taken it away. So that came from the left hand side.
And obviously, are you taking an assistant with you, or are you just getting a groomsman or someone like that to give you a hand to hold the flashes?
What's that? Sorry, I think I lost you there.
Sorry, Stephen. Are you taking an assistant with you, or are you using like a groomsman or a best man for the flash?
Yeah, always. I used to have an assistant. Now I just use the best man or anybody walking past, really. So yeah, I'm all alone.
And I thought this was quite a good question, so I thought I'd ask it now. Do you spend time researching the wedding locations and getting an idea for where the light might be in advance?
What was that? Sorry, I caught the last bit.
So, do you spend time researching the wedding venues and the locations, and you looking for the light in advance of the wedding day?
Okay. No, I rarely do that. I used to, but now I think it's more important to know to be able to see light and to act with it straight away. And the reason being, the day you go to the venue and look at it, well, if you 2 days later or whatever, the light's probably going to be completely different. So no, I love to work spontaneously. I don't plan too far ahead terms of shots. I believe in sort of learning how and when to see light and just acting upon it straight away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, perfect, mate. Brilliant. Cool. That's all the questions for now. I'm going to hang on to the rest, so you keep going, bud.
Okay, so I'm going to go through these slightly faster here, and then I'm going to just share with you exactly how I get my exposure. A couple of different techniques I use to get the exposure. So, well, I'll do that now actually. With this image, the sunset is obviously behind behind the couple. Quite often, what I will do is use my small flash behind the couple. So the Metros Plus flash gun I put behind and I hid this one behind the chair, and I have used my main battery powered light, the Indra 500, on the subject. I tend to use small modifiers, so I will either use just a standard 7-inch reflector with a honeycomb grid on it, or I used to use a beauty dish with a honeycomb grid on it. Now I'm actually using a small octobox, which basically stays on it all the time. But the main thing for me there is that it's small. The modifiers aren't too big. They're portable. They don't get in the way. Because I'm carrying this light around myself, I like them to be sort of as accessible as possible. So for this, quite often I will put the light to about 45 degrees off the subject and coming down sort of 45 degrees as well. The pose is very important here. I have brought the bride's face in toward the area where the light is coming from. That's very important. And also the groom's head is turned in and there's a bit of interaction between them there. the light behind the subject is adding to the story because of the natural light coming from the sun. But what I would do in this case is, no, it doesn't really matter whether you're using mirrorless cameras or not. I do now, and I can see, through my viewfinder the exposure I'm getting. There's a couple of different techniques you can use. If you use manual mode in your camera, I would suggest well, number one, you get. I used to use high speed sync a lot. I don't think I've actually used that probably in close to a year now, simply because I've just got into a way of working. I set my shutter speed and my ISO first. The shutter speed's probably usually in around 100th or 160th of a second. Keep the ISO as low as possible, and then just adjust the aperture to suit. I want the image roughly to be about one stop below. On a sunny day, that would need to go further, but in this case, you're probably talking one stop below. I want to retain the shadow detail and also the highlights in the sky. And once I have that exposure set, I will fill in with the flash. The sort of go-to flash, if I have a sunset, I'd probably have my flash on half power. There's no, you can obviously use a light meter if you want. I'm a bad boy, I don't use one, but again, it's just through time. I have a minimal equipment on me, and I've got to know now that, if I start off at half power, I will probably either just have to go up or down a wee little bit. But if your light has TTL function, that works absolutely amazing in these situations. But the main thing is to check the ambient light first and get that sorted, and then forget about the flash until you have that sorted, and then you're basically filling in with the light. If you need to put the power up and down a wee bit, or maybe move the direction, then that's all you need to do. And the same with the backlight. It's the same technique as such. So another image I just want to show you with natural light here. That is the sun is coming behind the couple. The wee flower girl had these bubbles and wanted me to do a picture. If it wasn't for me knowing that if I want to highlight these bubbles, I need the light either coming from the side or behind, I moved them into that position to have that effect, basically. But it's about knowing these wee things and acting upon it. Whenever I have a couple walking away from the camera, 9 times out of 10, you want the couple to be walking in toward the light, whether that's natural light or whether you put a wee bit of flash from the other side backlighting them. To me, the story, if they're walking away, they should be walking into that light to add to the story as such. This would have been a silhouette if I hadn't, they would have been in shadow if I hadn't have introduced a wee bit of flash here. There was a storm in the background. It was quite a really windy day, and I just wanted to highlight that fact. So I've just filled in, same technique as before, I just filled in with a slight wee bit of flash. The main thing is with this is to actually not put too much flash in. I think that's what I see the most with other people's images, and indeed my own used to be, you want the flash to be subtle, the slightest wee pop, just so that you can work with it, or you work with your file afterwards. Too much and then it just looks fake. So this is actually a workshop image. I'm just showing the exact same technique and how sort of dramatic you can get stuff using the sunset with the backlight and filling in. That's just one flash with a beauty dish on it. So I think for time purposes, I'm just going to these are all the same. Flash coming from the left. This is just to add a wee bit of drama to the image. It was quite flat without a flash, and I put the flash flash gun coming from the right hand side, and you can see the shadow of the bride and the groom. But the difference the flash made there was brilliant. I'm going to keep going here. This is again just filling in with flash. Slight pop of flash just to highlight the subject. And again, exact same thing here. I won an award for this image, and I remember the judge saying, "I'm glad you didn't light the man going past." And it was actually a bit of luck with this image, because I was in Paris, and I had the light was on the last shot we had done about half a mile down the road, and I just seen the man on the bike and quickly told them to look at each other, and I think there was a wee bit of luck with it, but my assistant who was with me at that time barely got the flash turned around in time. But exact same technique, as the light is coming from the other side of the couple, but I have filled in with one flash. And a slight wee pop of light here, otherwise there would have been no light on the faces. So I want to go through this. I'll go through this quite quickly. So that this is me going into a pre-wedding engagement shoot by moving by using natural light and moving the subjects in relation to light. You can tell a story just with a series of images. I have designed this in Fundy Software, which is obviously a very, very useful tool to use. But as you can see, I have started off using natural light. This is the natural sort of poses of the couple. I have them having some fun, playing around with each other, all natural light, and you know, everything sort of kept at a constant there. That I then would introduce slightly bit of flash and bring the story of the album coming into a wee bit more sort of story and drama. You can see there just exactly how I've used the fill flash with the off-camera flash, and just moving into the story, having them looking at each other. Again, still having fun at certain points in time, but we're getting a wee bit more serious as the light gets harder and the sun's going down that wee bit, and the story just sort of changes throughout the album. I can use my exposure differently to adjust the sort of story as such, and then this is an album that they have actually received, and then coming toward the end of the album, it's just sort of finishing off with a wee, quite a dark sort of good night type image. So Jay, what are we like there? Have any questions you want me to add, or will I go into the Have a Wedding album here? But I'm not sure time wise.
No, let's again. Most of the questions that I've still got now are sort of general ones, and obviously what we can do is, you and I can make sure we stay online and answer as many questions as we need to at the end. So let's go through the album. But I've got some really nice questions that I do want to share with you. But yeah,
okay,
nice.
Okay, so I have two albums here. I hope I have time to go through them. But this is one you'll have seen some of these images and that I've just shared. But so generally, there's a couple of different ways that I will design an album, and the first way that I would do that is to start off with some sort of a story and some sort of drama or storytelling. Or I consider my work as cinematic. So for this album, this is me starting off sort of dramatic, and then I will end with some sort of drama. Normally, I'll use off-camera flash in those images. There's quite a lot of pages in this album, so I'm just going to move swiftly on. You'll see most of these I'm using natural light, but I am placing the subjects, I am placing the shoes and the different things in a position so that they are actually getting light. And the same with whenever the bride is in the room getting ready. If they are not in a position where there's nice light in their face, don't be scared to say to the hairdresser, whatever, start getting into your posing, you're in full control of what you can do. Even if there's a dressmaker in fixing the bride, you can, by all means tell them to turn the opposite direction so that you have nice light in the picture, because you want things to stay at a constant. Going through all these images with the father meeting the bride, everything's exactly the same. And whenever I get to the groom, the first thing I am looking for is where is the direction of light coming from. You want, something like this wasn't the prettiest of churches. I had to sort of go in close. There was a lot going on in the background. So I'm trying to keep everything just as constant as possible for the album, because there's no point in me taking something really, half my image is really dark at this stage, because it is a sort of soft opening to the album. She's going in to get married, everybody's happy, and the lighting in the church, this particular church, the lighting was pretty bad, because the only windows are coming from one side, and there are actually curtains over them, which is quite high up. This, so that we can get to the other parts. This is all just ambient light. Whenever we got outside, there was I think there had been just a shower of rain, but the light was actually quite nice where they were. I have set up this shot. This wouldn't happen naturally. I have to place the wedding guests right and left to create a tunnel and get the bride and groom to walk through it. It's just adding to the story. Again, this is the picture, a double page spread of the album with the bride just about to get out of the car and the groom opening the door. And now we just start going into their portraits, where if I do use flash, I'm wanting to use it in the most subtle ways, so that there's only the slightest wee pop. Basically, I don't want the picture to look like I've used flash. I haven't used it here, but there will be some times where I have used it and you hopefully can't tell, because so if I want it to look that it has natural light, it should look like that. Going through the bridal party, different poses. I never spend too much time, normally about 10 minutes with the bridal party. Just going through a run of my poses, and then going into the bride and groom. Natural light, again, getting the natural pictures of them. Nice soft light, soft posing. You can see in the image to the right there that I have used a wee bit of flash there. And then introducing the sort of more dramatic images, I've got a few of those in the album. And before we go into the speeches and that, this is me just photographing the actual venue. This wedding I didn't actually stay late, I just photographed until the speeches. There was lovely sort of nice even light, slightly flat light in the marquee, as there usually is. And then I'm finishing off the album with a couple of dramatic images of the bride and groom and having a wee dance. This happened in the afternoon, and then heading upstairs. How are we there, Jed? Will I just stop with that album, or will I go through Nicola and Phillips?
No, I think we're good. If is it about the same length of time, Stephen? Do you think?
Yeah, this one's shorter.
Yeah, let's keep going, man. I think it's really interesting the way that you sort of, will lay out the actual wedding. So I think it's good for people to see. I think they're
Yeah, absolutely. So this wedding album's slightly different. I have used one layout for this couple, and like every single page in this album is the same in terms of the size and the layout. Fundy Software has literally changed my whole sort of outlook. I used to pay somebody to design my albums, and it was like normally sort of 30 or 40 pounds for each album design. Now, if I need help, I'll pay her to come in for a day and design 7, 8, 9 albums in the one day, which is obviously totally different. But I rarely need to do that, because it's so fast. Like, it's 15, 20 minutes per album. It's absolutely amazing. But this album here, I spent most of the time in this album creating the story in terms of telling the story and taking pages, swapping them about and stuff. So this album, as I say, every page is exactly the same. I'm trying to sort of go from between a sort of happy and sad vibes, because this is the couple that had lost a child, and there's sort of two different stories running there. Yes, it's a very happy day, but they've also a bit of sadness too. So yeah, you can see how I'm using the light there. The bride is nearly sort of silhouetted up on the top, and that was a natural moment. I placed the father and mother, and she just happened to fix her dress. Moving on to the groom, this is full sunlight. I am sort of using the light to the advantage in terms of the pose. I'm turning the groom's face in the left picture into the light. The light is obviously coming from the left, and that's done intensely. Moving on to the bride, same pose as I done with the groom, meeting the son, their other son, who was waiting on her. You can see the sort of sad vibes coming through here, but this the lay of this album is just to keep, to me this has to be, you know, simplistic. I don't want loads of pictures to take away from the story. We're back into happiness. They're heading off in a helicopter, which was a surprise, and then we're into a very sad moment, obviously, of their remembrance of their wee boy in their day. And then I have tried to sort of flow that sadness back from obviously the visit from the grave, a picture of the wee boy moving into a sort of sad pose, with using the harder light for that, and then creating sort of more happy vibes, walking away from the camera, posing, looking at each other, and then there just a few more sort of poses and a wee bit more sort of happy vibes, and then finishing off and the portraits with the bridal party, and then the reception venue speeches. This is important to point out here. The windows behind the bride and groom here are massive windows. There's a lot of light pouring in. If I went at a 90-degree angle of the bride and groom, I would have absolutely no detail in the background at all. I have shot from that one side for a couple of different reasons. The main one is the background, but also to get nice light on the bride's face. So think about that. If you have a lot of light coming from behind, just move off to the side. And I have been using a wee bit of flash on the camera here just to get images of the bride. That's her with her other son, who was very sad at this point, obviously remembering his wee brother, and then finishing off with some poses in the sunset. So that's the end of that album. Jay, if you want to, I'm ready for any questions.
Well, there's a few there, mate. So get yourself sat down for a second. They're not going to be in any particular order, Stephen. But before I forget, mate, what an insight. So thanks for that. There was a couple of things.
No problem.
I wanted to pick up on, but as much as we've been invited to you tonight to join us, and obviously Fundy have as well. I can't stress enough how fast and how brilliant the Fundy does change, is a game changer. And if you haven't seen it already, guys, go and watch the webinars that we've done with Fundy. It's actually Andrew Funderburg himself on how easy it is to use. But let's get into the questions that I've got for you, Stephen. Let me just. Okay. Rob the screen back a second. Okay, so as I said, mate, not in any particular order. How much time would you say that you spend in post-production per wedding?
So I have two different areas that I concentrate on. The first, edit, which culling and editing the pictures takes me 3 to 4 hours. That basically gets the images into, culled down and into a state where I can sort of show them. There's sort of color corrections and things are done, and then the next stage, which is at the album time, I'll spend probably another couple of hours on editing the album images. Before that's maximum, a couple of hours editing the album images before the bride and groom, before I order the album as such. But I don't do that until I have the images approved by the bride and groom on the online proofing system.
Brilliant. I thought this was quite an interesting question, and quite apt now that we're showing your mugshot with your big Canon instead of your new Sony. So I might need to update your headshot, mate. The question though, with regards to the smaller mirrorless systems now, Have you had any negative reactions from the clients using the smaller cameras?
No, not at all. I bought a Sony camera a couple of years ago, and I remember another photographer, said to me that it didn't look very professional, and I did take that on board. Do you know now? I nobody has said anything to me, but do you know if they did, I would just tell them it was an amazing camera. Or, do you know, just tell them how much it cost, and
Uh,
that would maybe change their view.
I think perceptions are definitely changing. I think a few years ago it was a different kettle of fish, but now with the
Yeah,
technology, people are so familiar with how good your mobile phone is that they don't seem to have that issues with
yeah,
cameras anymore. And obviously your work speaks for itself as well at the end of the day. But yeah, so I think I thought it was an interesting question.
yeah.
We had a similar question come through a few times, so I just kept the one. It was quite early on. The first question came through. I think there was a couple walking past the river. There was a sign just behind them. And the question was, obviously, we've noticed a few shots of the bride and groom, and even in your engagement shoot where they're walking. Do you get
Uh-huh.
them in walking mode, or do you pose them as well to pretend like they're walking to get the shots? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so any shoot that I do, I always and like always start off with a walking shot. Um, the first time I do it, I will just say, just come walking toward me. The purpose is to get rid of any sort of unnaturalness between them and any sort of tension. So I just get them to come walking toward me. I maybe try and get them to laugh, and then I'll tell them, I may not even use these pictures, but I tell them exactly why I'm doing it, and that kind of gets rid of any sort of unnatural vibes between us. And then throughout the actual wedding day, the reason why I do that, I used to get stuck. And I had a thing in my head where I thought, if I get stuck, I'll just tell them to walk. But now it's actually the main part of my posing because I want it to look natural. So now I'll get them to walk, and I have wee things that I'll do to sort of introduce different shots, like get them to stop and look behind and do different things. But the walking is the basis of probably most of the posing I do on the day.
Brilliant. I thought this was quite a nice question, Steve. Any tips on calming the couple's nerves to make them look more less tense?
Yeah, so that well, first of all, get them walking. Um, that really does work. Get them, if you need to work out people's personalities, that's a very big thing. And what I mean by that is, don't get them doing silly ideas. And whenever I say silly ideas, I've done it myself. Um, you put people under pressure by doing things they might not want to do, and then the awkwardness just gets even worse. So try and keep things natural. Like if you can get the couple to interact with each other, sometimes just hug, tell them to have a wee, just to talk amongst themselves a wee second. You need to fix something in your camera or change your settings, and within a few minutes they'll have relaxed. And obviously you should be shooting that. You're just pretending you're fixing your camera. So the main thing is talking to them, getting them interacting with each other. And for me, the movement in it is key to sort of making them not look awkward anymore. But sometimes I just get them to fool around with each other, not in a cheesy way, but even if just smacking into each other and sort of yeah, just trying to get as natural as possible.
Oh, great advice, mate. Brilliant. It's quite interesting, especially like you were talking about in the way we did the album flows, obviously, and tonight's title was storytelling. Is that something that you discuss quite a bit in advance with the pre-wedding? That you are you are a visual storyteller. Is that a big part of the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell my couples, that what I try and do is be as honest as I can with couples, and I I will tell them that, the reason why I take so many images, the reason why I need to start somewhere like walking, and we'll finish the album off walking. I'll tell them how passionate I am about printing, and that I want to sort of fill our album and do all these different things. So yeah, I will sit down with them before the wedding day and tell them exactly what. I tell them what to expect and what not to expect in terms of how most people will say, I find, I hate, please don't pose me. So it's very important that I tell them that I do pose, but you're going to look like this, and have the confidence, and to say that you will look natural. So I go through all that stuff with them beforehand.
Brilliant. What I found really interesting tonight, Stephen, well, not well, all of it, but was quite nice how we actually showed tonight the engagement album, and the fact that it was an engagement album, which I thought was a really nice take on that. And a few questions came in from that, because you treated the engagement shoot in the same way, albeit a mini version of the wedding, but by telling the story of the engagement. Is the engagement session a separate sale for you, or is that part of the wedding package?
No, that's a separate sale for me. I used to include an engagement photo shoot in my packages, and basically, like a few years ago, I was shooting 75 weddings a year. I've put my prices up and reduced that now, but basically everybody took it, and I was running all over the place doing these shoots, and people rarely bought anything. Like I really had to catch myself on. So now, under my name, I have two brands. One I don't shoot for, but under my name as such, there's three shoots that I do, and that's the first thing I tell people whenever we start talking business as such. I have a pre-wedding shoot, which I call a connect shoot, and I sell that to them. Basically, they're connecting with each other, yes, but it's also to connect with me, and we'll spend 2 to 3 hours one day, maybe going for a coffee and doing this, and at the end of it, they will get an album. That I don't have. All my sales are pre-sold, so I do all beforehand. So I say, this is what it is. You get an album at the end of it. There is a chance to upgrade that, but the main thing is that they're getting an album from that shoot. The wedding day is exactly the same. They know the sort of price going in. They will get a free album, as what I would call it, my standard sort of graphic studio gold book on the wedding day, but then have a chance to upgrade their albums. And then with the post-wedding shoot, I don't do an album for that, but they get extra album pages, but all three are separate sales as such. You know
Brilliant.
what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's great. And I just thought, well, that was the thing that I picked up on from that engagement shoot, seeing it the way you treated it. And obviously, just ka-ching was like, well, album sale, there you go. And you've just answered brilliantly. Love that. And so, it's thinking outside the box as well, isn't it? People just think, oh, the engagement shoot is, just get used to the photographer, get used to us, and then you might get a picture out of it, but an album sale, brilliant. Yeah, nailed that. Love it. Brilliant. I thought this was quite a nice question. I think you've kind of answered it, but I kept it. It was regards to sort of the details and getting the shot of the hanging up dress. I presume you're not afraid to ask, not necessarily do it yourself, but ask for the dress to be moved for the right light and the right location.
Yeah, I just I will always ask before I move it myself, but 9 times out of 10 I move it myself. I just said I make a joke of it. I say, do you trust a man to move your dress? And most people just say, yeah, go ahead. But while others will say, no, I'll move it. So, but I always ask, and what I do though before the wedding day, I will say, on the morning of the wedding, the first thing I want to do is get those shots. I don't particularly like those shots, to be honest. I prefer photographing people. I say, I'll do that first. Can you please put all your details, anything that you want photographed, into the one room? Say it's a bedroom, and lay it all out how you want it. If you want me to sort of, I can fix it and stuff, but rather than me running around the house wondering what you want photographed, just put it all in place. Some people do it that well, I don't even have to move it. So that that's the reason why I ask that, is just to make things easier for me. But certainly, if I have to move it, there's never an issue doing so.
Brilliant. Do you have a checklist of shots with regards to the bride and groom photography? Is this something you always go after?
Yeah, so and now that is basically in my head. What I used to do, I used to write wee small sort of cards and have a checklist as such. I kept that in my camera bag, and I would have referred to that throughout the photo shoot. And the reason for that is because whenever you're under that amount of pressure, I found I could easily walk away thinking I had a load of pictures and didn't have enough. But generally, it was the opposite. I used to come home thinking I got nothing today, and then whenever I looked at my images, I probably photographed them far too much. But it just shows you the pressure I was under. So, but now I have a rule that if I photograph a bride and groom full length, I'll do 3 shots, in the same way as somebody would probably do video. I'll do a full length, I'll go in closer, and I'll go in closer again. And I do that for nearly every shot I do. And it means that I have 3 shots in one pose as such. And you end up, I do, most bride and grooms, I don't have them much longer than 20 minutes for their own shoot. So you have to be smart in the posing. So you do.
You've just answered one of my other questions: is how long do you get for the couple's portraits? So, which is
yeah, so it varies. The very most, and a very very most. Sometimes you would have people for an hour, but generally I tell them that an hour does everything, and I would say 10 minutes for the 10-15 minutes bridal party, 15 minutes family photographs, and 20 minutes to half an hour with the bride and groom. I've done everything in 15 minutes before, because I just have had to. And surprisingly, the album was, you couldn't really tell any difference. But and in that sort of case, you don't do much creative, different stuff. But yeah, it's just you have to keep it moving.
Brilliant. Do you fade? Well, obviously tonight we've mostly seen rectangular albums. Is that what you prefer, Stephen? Because you said you prefer the cinematic, or will you shoot square?
I do. I do a square album. The pre-wedding album is a square album, but there's very few images in that would go full page. With my weddings, I don't offer portrait albums at all. Everything is the landscape albums, simply because of my style. And I've actually never had, I've shot over the last sort of 5-6 years. I think I've shot 350 to 400 weddings. I have never been asked to change that to portrait. So,
Well, with some of the wider shots, would you favour on-camera flash if you needed it?
the only time I would use on-camera flash, in fact, I haven't had a flash on my Sony yet. So the only time I would have used it is during the dancing, and possibly in a really dark church if I had to use it. But that is an absolute if I really have to. Otherwise, everything is off camera. So it is. Even now with my Sony, I use in the dancing, I have my flash in my left hand and my camera in the right. If I'm doing, like second curtain sync shots at the very end of the night, which I had been on Saturday night, I'm walking about with the flash up above my head and pointing at the subject and the camera in my hand. So I just never use it on the camera anymore.
Brilliant. So just with the going back to sort of pre-discussion with the bride and groom before the day, are you running through the sort of the running order of the day in advance, or do you just go with the flow? Because you said you do a mixture of documentary and sort of obviously posed.
Yeah, I go through every detail with the bride and groom, what to expect. So basically what I'll say is the things that I really need, and I'll split it up to the morning, the church, and the afternoon, and I'll tell them what I do in the morning. So it's natural shots, detail shots, and then I'd say, is there anything over and above that you want? Do you want pictures in your dress? Because if you do, we need to arrange a time, because I meet the groom normally at the church 45 minutes before the wedding. I just explain all that. And then I explain that in the church they won't hear from me. I'll be in the background. The next time they hear from me is if I'm doing a shot of them signing the register, the officiant would hand over. And then I just say, for the afternoon, the only thing I demand on the wedding day, because I'm not like a demanding person as such, and I try not to take control. I try and be as quiet as I can. But I always say, whenever I'm doing your pictures, I need you on your own. I can't have people there cheering you on, simply because I can't get the best out of a couple if, for example, the bride's uncle is watching. Like, if I asked them to kiss or something, how awkward would that be? So I honestly don't care, people shooting over my shoulder. I could do that all day. I'm not really worried. It's more, it's about expression for me. So the only thing I say in the afternoon is, please, can I have you on your own? And if anybody goes to come along, rather than me be the cheeky one, can you please say we need to be on our own here? And that always works for me. I kind of put it into their hands.
No, brilliant. I get it. Absolutely. What would you say your average, well, okay, it's a two-part question really. How many images do you think you actually shoot on a wedding day typically, and how many then do you actually deliver to the bride and groom, would you say?
Do you know what changes for every wedding changes? I used to shoot, I would say anywhere between 100 images. A few years ago, I was very selective of my shots. And I think I was so selective of my shots because I was listening to people tell me to do that as such. I Now I just shoot to my heart's content. Every wedding's different, and if they have me on my standard time, which is bridal prep to speeches, I would say on average between 1,500 and 2,000 images, and they will get probably 600 images, or anywhere between 500 and 700 images. I have come home from weddings with 4,000 images before, especially if I had a couple of weddings where I had two shooters and I had around that. But generally, that only happens about once a year. It's normally in close to 1,800, 2,000 images now. Or if I feel if it's a bigger wedding, I just sometimes somehow end up coming home with a lot more. But the most I've ever gave a bride and groom are about 1,000 images. But I try not to do that because I find it's too many. But because the album, like the most I've ever put in an album, I think is about 160. But generally the albums only have about 70 or 80 pictures in them.
Brilliant. Well, actually, that leads us on nicely to the next couple of questions. Sorry, excuse me. You mentioned earlier about obviously in part of the presentation that you proof the images to the bride and groom via the Fundy proofing software, which is brilliant. Do you kind of determine what's going in the album, or do you let them have some say? So what I'm getting at, is it like a pre-album design? Are you kind of picking the best, or are they choosing all the images?
Okay, so the way I used to do it, I used to tell them, please send me a written list or email me a list of the file numbers that you want in your album. But generally, I found it was about 2 years after the wedding that I was hounding people to get their wedding album to them. But I decided to change that, and I tell them now, look, if you don't mind, I'll pick the pictures. I'll do that soon after I have your wedding, the first stage of your edit done, and I will send you your wedding album design via the online proofing site. And at that stage, if you want to change the pictures that I've chosen, just put a note into the software, onto the site, or tell me to change it, or we can go through the whole thing again. And I would, like, 9 times out of 10 people agree to that, and very rarely do they have more than 1 or 2 changes. Because at the end of the day, I shoot weddings like all the time, so I've got to know what they want in their wedding album. sometimes I miss maybe a family member or something, but generally it's fine. And it means now I can tell. I say to them, if you let me do this, you probably have your wedding album within a few months of your wedding. Otherwise, you'll get into the way of life, and I'll probably hear from me in a year's time.
Brilliant. Guys, I will ask Stephen the questions that we have left in the question panel, but we have run over. So these are the last questions I'll answer now. But thank you for all your input. But we've still got a few to go, Steve. Are you okay to stick with us for a few more minutes?
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant. I thought this was interesting. You showed it right early on that you're shooting the A9 and the A7. Was there a reason that you chose two different Sonys rather than two identical ones? Most practices is to have a backup that's the same.
Yeah, so some friends that use Sony had said to me, go for the A7R3. It's kind of more of the all-round camera, and the A9's a sports camera, and I thought I'll test them out. I loved the A9. I did think straight after, why did I not buy two of these? But I'm glad I didn't, because the A7R3 I use more so for, if I get a commercial job or for portraits, that I think I might get a larger wall print sale. I'll use the A7R3, whereas wedding albums, 90%, probably more than 90% of my wedding albums are all the same size, for sort of 14 by 10 album, well, 30, 35, 25 album. So the files are more than enough for that. I use the A7R3 for the off-camera flash for the main portraits that I do, because that's more than likely what somebody's going to order as a bigger frame. But if I need to use the A7R3 on a full wedding, there's absolutely no issue doing that, because they're a very similar camera in many ways.
Brilliant. That's great, mate. Thanks for that. This is a question about post-production. Are you doing it yourself or do you outsource it?
So I have went through stages. I was last year using pro image editors to do the first stage edit, and I was sending the Lightroom, the smart previews to them, and they were. But in the midst of the summer, if I'm under pressure, I have no problem using that external company to do that. But I try and do it myself as much as possible.
And do you favour presets or collections, or in your post production, or?
I used an external preset as such for the first time last year. Generally, I just sort of make up my own. I have a few different ones that I use on different weddings, but it all depends on, if it's a sunny day, or if, the color of the bridal dresses, or how dramatic it is. I kind of change it to suit each wedding. But I do have a few, and some have came from some of the sort of generic ones out there that I bought. But I'm just using my own.
Brilliant, mate. We're getting there. Just two more questions to go, Stephen. You mentioned that one of your packages, or part of your package, was a post-wedding shoot. And somebody just asked if you could elaborate on that, and what is a post-wedding shoot?
Okay, so I give the bride and groom an option to do the post-wedding shoot. Is similar to a trash the dress shoot, but we don't trash the dress. Basically, the way I sell it to them is, we will meet up either the next day after the wedding, or a month later, or whenever they can. They will get back into their wedding attire, and we will meet up. Some of the locations in this country in Northern Ireland are amazing, and generally I will say, let's meet up somewhere, just that we couldn't get to on the wedding day. Generally, I use the coast, and mostly Game of Thrones set locations. There's quite a lot of them over here, and I just say we'll spend 2 or 3 hours getting really, really nice images, and there's no pressure. And with the sale, you'll have 10 spreads in your wedding album, and all these pictures will be put in at the end.
Brilliant. Great. That's what I thought it was, but it'd be great great. Thanks for sharing that with everybody. Um, Last question I've got for you, Stephen, because I said otherwise we'll be here all night. I thought this was interesting. You mentioned about times where you do work with a second shooter. In those instances, would you still be doing the post production, or would the second shooter do their own editing?
No, I do the post production on their images. Do you know, on the occasions where a bride and groom have asked me for a second photographer, or maybe I have just thought it was a big wedding, and on a few occasions I've maybe asked a couple of friends to help. They are basically taking you know a different angle of the vows or the church service or whatever, and speeches. So quite often it's the more sort of natural photographs which tie in with mine anyway. So generally I don't use a lot of those images in the album anyway, but certainly they're easy to edit in the same style as mine because they're usually natural light.
Brilliant, brilliant. Stephen, there's a few things we'll talk about quickly before we go, but in case I forget, and I never forget, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been really insightful. Lots of praise in the chat panel, thanking you for your insights. I think we've been so busy talking about you, we've made Jack a little bit redundant from Fundy. But Jack, if you are there, thanks for being with us, mate. But obviously, anybody, I've got to say, stress. We've talked about it, not so much tonight, but if you haven't tried Fundy already, you've got to go and do the free trial, because it will change your album design immediately, and won't believe how amazingly fast it is. It's so intuitive. So, guys, you've got to go and check that out. Stephen, mate, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I think I'm very much sure that I'll be inviting you back. So hopefully you'll be up for doing it again in the future. I'd love to. Maybe we can look at maybe we'll look at just something.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you.